My girlfriend said she needed space to grow, then moved in with her ex. Now she's begging me back. But what I posted left her in tears. I'm 26 and 3 months ago, I thought I was living the perfect love story. My girlfriend Natalie and I had been together for 2.5 years, and everything seemed to be falling into place. We'd moved in together 6 months prior, talked about marriage, even started looking at engagement rings online. I was head over heels for this woman, completely convinced she was the one I'd spend my life with. Natalie is 24, works as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup, and has this infectious laugh that could light up any room. When we first met at a coffee shop near downtown, she was struggling with her laptop, and I offered to help. One conversation led to another, and before I knew it, we were talking for 3 hours straight. She was smart, ambitious, and had this way of making me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. Our relationship moved fast, but it felt natural. Within 6 months, we were practically inseparable. She'd stay over at my place most nights, we'd cook dinner together, binge-watch shows, plan weekend trips. I introduced her to my family during Thanksgiving that first year, and she fit right in. My mom loved her immediately, always asking when I was going to propose. My dad, who's usually skeptical of anyone I date, pulled me aside after dinner and said he'd never seen me so happy. By our second year, we developed these little routines that made me feel like we were already married. Saturday morning farmers market runs, Sunday afternoon hikes, weekly date nights where we'd try new restaurants. Natalie had this habit of stealing my hoodies, and I'd find them scattered around her apartment smelling like her perfume. She'd leave little notes in my lunch bag when I had important meetings at work. It was the kind of relationship that made other people jealous. The only thing that occasionally bothered me was how often her ex-boyfriend Oliver came up in conversation. They dated for 3 years in college and apparently remained friends afterward. She'd mention him casually, like how he'd recommended some restaurant or how funny his latest social media post was. When I asked about it, she'd brush it off saying they were just friends and that I had nothing to worry about. I trusted her completely, so I let it slide. Oliver worked in the same industry as Natalie, so they'd occasionally run into each other at networking events or industry conferences. She'd come home and mention seeing him, always in passing, always casual. He'd apparently gotten engaged to someone else during our first year together, which actually made me feel more secure about their friendship. If he was moving on with someone else, what threat could he possibly pose to our relationship? Looking back now, I realized there were signs I chose to ignore, like how she'd sometimes take phone calls in the other room, or how she'd gotten more protective of her phone lately. She'd started working late more often, coming home stressed and distant. When I'd try to comfort her or ask what was wrong, she'd say it was just work pressure and that she needed to focus on her career. 3 months ago, everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was making dinner when she came home looking more serious than I'd ever seen her. She sat down at our kitchen table and took a deep breath before speaking. "Gabriel, we need to talk." Those 4 words sent ice through my veins. She told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking about us, about her life, about where she wanted to be in 5 years. She said she loved me but felt like she'd lost herself in our relationship. She needed space to grow as an individual, to figure out who she was outside of being someone's girlfriend. She was 24 and had gone from a long relationship with Oliver straight into one with me. She'd never had time to be truly independent. I was stunned. This was coming out of nowhere, at least from my perspective. We'd been talking about our future together just the week before, looking at apartments in a nicer neighborhood. I asked her what had changed, what I'd done wrong, whether there was something specific that triggered this. She insisted it wasn't about me, that I was an amazing boyfriend and any woman would be lucky to have me. She just needed time to focus on herself. The conversation lasted for hours. I tried everything I could think of to change her mind. I offered to give her more space while still being together, suggested we could slow things down, even proposed the idea of taking a break instead of breaking up entirely. But her mind was made up. She said she'd already looked into getting her own place and would start moving her things out that weekend. That night was one of the worst of my life. We slept in the same bed, but it felt like there was an ocean between us. I kept replaying every moment of the past few months, searching for clues I'd missed, wondering if I'd been blind to her unhappiness. In the morning, she was gentle but firm. She packed a bag for work and kissed my forehead before leaving, promising we'd talk more about logistics later. The next few days were a blur of her packing boxes and me trying to process what was happening. She was kind but distant, treating me more like a roommate than someone she'd been planning a future with. She kept reassuring me that this wasn't about anyone else, that she just needed to discover who she was on her own. I wanted to believe her so badly that I convinced myself this was just a phase, that once she had her space, she'd realize what we had together was worth fighting for. The first month after Natalie moved out was brutal. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the empty apartment that still smelled like her perfume. Her coffee mug was still in the sink where she'd left it that last morning. Her favorite blanket was folded on the couch. I couldn't bring myself to pack away the reminders of our life together. She'd moved into a small studio apartment across town, and we'd agreed to minimal contact while she figured things out. She'd text me occasionally, usually late at night, saying she missed me and hoped I was taking care of myself. Those messages gave me hope that maybe this separation was temporary, that she'd come to her senses and we'd work things out. My friends tried to be supportive, but most of them were as confused as I was. My buddy Lucas kept saying he'd never seen two people more perfect for each other, and that Natalie would realize her mistake soon enough. My sister Amy was less optimistic, warning me not to put my life on hold waiting for someone who'd already made their choice. But I couldn't help holding on to hope. About 6 weeks after the breakup, I was scrolling through social media when I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of Natalie's coworkers had posted pictures from a company happy hour, and there in the background was Natalie laughing with Oliver. They were sitting close together, his arm casually draped over the back of her chair. It could have been innocent, but something about their body language looked too familiar, too comfortable. I tried to push the paranoia away, telling myself I was reading too much into a single photo. But over the next few days, I found myself checking social media obsessively, looking for any sign of what Natalie was really up to. She'd become more active on Instagram, posting pictures of herself at restaurants and events I didn't recognize. She looked happy, carefree even, like the weight of our relationship had been lifted from her shoulders. 2 weeks later, my worst fears were confirmed. I was grabbing coffee at a place near my office when I saw them together. Natalie and Oliver, sitting at a corner table, holding hands across the table like a couple. They were looking into each other's eyes the way she used to look at me, and my heart shattered all over again. I stood there frozen for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Part of me wanted to confront them, to demand an explanation for the lies she'd told me. But another part of me, the part that still loved her desperately, couldn't bear the humiliation of that conversation. So I left without them seeing me, my hands shaking as I walked back to my car. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove past her apartment building, just hoping to see her car and confirm she was home alone. But her parking spot was empty, and Oliver's distinctive blue sedan was nowhere to be found either. I sat there for an hour, feeling pathetic and heartbroken, before finally driving home. The next morning, I got a text from Natalie asking if I wanted to meet for coffee to catch up. The casual tone of her message felt like a slap in the face after what I'd witnessed the day before. I wanted to tell her I'd seen her with Oliver, to call her out for lying about needing space to grow. Instead, I agreed to meet her, hoping she'd finally tell me the truth. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd first encountered each other 3 years earlier. She looked beautiful, more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. She asked about my work, my family, my life like we were old friends catching up instead of former lovers whose relationship had imploded. The whole conversation felt surreal. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her directly if she was seeing someone else. Her face flushed red, and she looked down at her coffee cup for a long moment before answering. She said she'd reconnected with Oliver recently, that they'd been talking and spending time together as friends. She insisted it wasn't romantic, that they were just figuring things out. But I could see through the lie. The way she avoided eye contact, the defensive tone in her voice, the fact that she felt the need to explain their connection at all. I told her I'd seen them together, holding hands, looking very much like a couple. Her composure cracked then, and she admitted they'd been getting close, but insisted it had nothing to do with our breakup. According to Natalie, she and Oliver had started talking again around the time she began having doubts about our relationship. He was going through his own breakup and reached out for support. Their conversations made her realize how much she'd changed since college, how much of herself she'd lost in serious relationships. She claimed seeing him again didn't cause our breakup, but rather confirmed that she needed time to figure out who she was. I asked her point blank if she'd been emotionally involved with Oliver while we were still together. She hesitated before saying their connection had been purely platonic until after we broke up. But something in her voice told me she wasn't being completely honest, that maybe even she wasn't sure when her feelings had shifted. The conversation ended with her asking if we could still be friends, if I could support her journey of self-discovery even if it meant accepting her relationship with Oliver. She said I meant too much to her to lose completely, that our connection was too special to throw away over romantic complications. I told her I needed time to process everything, but inside I was seething. The woman I'd planned to marry had left me for her ex-boyfriend and had the audacity to ask for my friendship in return. She'd strung me along for weeks with talks of needing space while secretly rebuilding her relationship with someone else. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. 3 weeks after that devastating coffee meeting, I found out just how deep Natalie's deception ran. My friend Marcus works in the same building as Oliver's company, and he'd seen them together multiple times over the past 2 months. Not just casual coffee meetings, but intimate dinners, weekend outings, even what looked like apartment hunting. The final blow came when Marcus told me he'd seen Oliver helping Natalie move boxes into his apartment building. She hadn't just been seeing her ex behind my back. She'd been planning to move in with him while still feeding me lies about needing independence and space to grow. Every conversation we'd had about her journey of self-discovery had been a carefully constructed fiction. I felt like an idiot for believing her, for holding on to hope that we might reconcile, for respecting her request for space while she was building a new life with someone else. The worst part was realizing that our entire relationship had probably been a rebound for her, something to fill the void until she could get back together with her real love. That night, I drafted a long text message telling her exactly what I thought of her lies, but I never sent it. I wanted her to know how badly she'd hurt me, how betrayed I felt, but I also didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had that much power over my emotions. Instead, I decided to take a different approach. I'd been working on a photography project for months, taking candid shots around the city and posting them on social media with thoughtful captions about life and relationships. My posts had been gaining some traction, with friends and strangers alike commenting on how relatable and honest my perspective was. I had a decent following of people who seemed to appreciate authentic content about the ups and downs of modern dating. So I crafted a post that told my story without naming names. I wrote about loving someone completely, about making plans for a future together, about being blindsided by a breakup that was supposedly about personal growth. I wrote about discovering that the person you trusted most had been lying to your face while building a relationship with someone else. The post was raw and emotional but not vindictive. I focused on the lessons I'd learned about trust, about reading between the lines when someone's words don't match their actions, about the importance of honesty even when the truth is painful. I included a photo I'd taken of an empty park bench at sunset, symbolic of promises that were never meant to be kept. Within hours, the post had dozens of comments from friends and followers sharing their own stories of betrayal and deception. People were tagging others who'd been through similar situations, and the engagement kept growing throughout the day. By the next morning, it had been shared hundreds of times and had attracted thousands of likes and comments. I started getting messages from people thanking me for putting their experiences into words, for helping them feel less alone in their heartbreak. Some shared stories that were eerily similar to mine. Others offered support and encouragement. The response was overwhelming and therapeutic in ways I hadn't expected. But the real impact came 3 days later when Natalie called me crying. Through her sobs, she told me that mutual friends had been sending her my post, that people were connecting the dots and realizing she was the subject of my story. She said she was devastated that I'd aired our private business publicly, that she never meant to hurt me the way she had. She begged me to take the post down, saying it was affecting her reputation at work and causing problems in her relationship with Oliver. Apparently, some of their mutual friends and colleagues had seen the post and were questioning her character. She insisted she'd never intentionally deceived me, that things with Oliver had just evolved naturally after our breakup. But I knew that wasn't true. The timeline didn't add up, and her reaction to my post confirmed that she knew exactly how wrong her behavior had been. If she'd truly believed she'd handled our breakup with integrity, my story wouldn't have affected her so deeply. I told her I wouldn't take the post down because every word of it was true. I hadn't mentioned her name or shared any details that weren't already public knowledge. If people were drawing their own conclusions about her character based on my experience, maybe that said more about her actions than my words. She tried to argue that I was being vindictive, that I was punishing her for being honest about her feelings. But honesty would have been telling me about Oliver from the beginning, not stringing me along with false hope while secretly planning her future with someone else. I'd given her countless opportunities to come clean, and she'd chosen deception every time. The conversation ended with her hanging up on me, but not before saying she'd never forgive me for humiliating her this way. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Part of me was glad she was finally experiencing consequences for her actions, but another part mourned the loss of the person I'd thought she was. 2 weeks after my post went viral, the fallout for Natalie continued to unfold in ways I never could have anticipated. My story had struck a nerve with people who'd experienced similar betrayals, and it kept getting shared across different platforms and social circles. What started as a personal reflection had become a broader conversation about honesty in relationships and the courage to tell difficult truths. Natalie tried reaching out through mutual friends, asking them to convince me to remove the post. She claimed it was affecting her mental health and her relationship with Oliver. According to our friend Jessica, Oliver was having second thoughts about their relationship after seeing how quickly Natalie had moved from me to him. He was questioning whether she'd do the same thing to him if someone better came along. I felt a strange mix of vindication and sympathy. I never intended to destroy her relationship, just to tell my truth and help others who might be going through similar situations. But I couldn't deny there was some poetic justice in watching her face the consequences of choices she'd made. The most unexpected development came when I received a message from Oliver himself. He asked if we could meet for coffee, saying he had some things he needed to discuss with me. Against my better judgment, I agreed, curious about what he could possibly want to say. When we met, Oliver looked uncomfortable and remorseful. He told me he'd read my post and realized he'd been part of something that caused me real pain. He admitted that he and Natalie had been talking regularly for months before our breakup, that their connection had been emotional and intimate even if it wasn't initially physical. He revealed that Natalie had been complaining about our relationship during their conversations, painting me as someone who was holding her back from achieving her full potential. She'd made it sound like she was trapped and unhappy, desperate for an escape that she couldn't find on her own. He'd encouraged her to follow her heart, never realizing that he was essentially encouraging her to leave me for him. Oliver said he was beginning to see a pattern in Natalie's behavior that worried him. She'd left him in college for someone else, claiming she needed to explore other connections and grow as a person. Now she'd left me using almost identical language, and he was starting to wonder if this was just how she handled relationships when they became too real or committed. He apologized for his part in the deception, saying he should have encouraged Natalie to be honest with me instead of helping her craft a narrative that protected her from having difficult conversations. He admitted that part of him had always wondered if she'd left him for me the same way she'd left me for him. The conversation was surreal but oddly healing. Oliver wasn't the villain I'd painted him as in my mind. He was just another person who'd been manipulated by Natalie's inability to be direct about her feelings and intentions. We both realized we'd been victims of her pattern of emotional dishonesty. After our meeting, Oliver apparently confronted Natalie about the timeline of their relationship and her history of leaving partners for other people. According to Jessica, the conversation didn't go well. Natalie accused him of believing strangers on the internet over someone he'd known for years. She said my post was a vindictive ex-boyfriend's attempt to ruin her happiness. But Oliver had started connecting dots that went beyond my story. He remembered how quickly she'd moved from him to me years ago, how she'd used similar language about needing space and time to grow. He began questioning whether she was capable of genuine commitment or if she just moved from person to person whenever relationships required real work. Last week, Jessica told me that Oliver and Natalie had broken up. Apparently, he decided he couldn't trust someone who'd proven twice that she'd rather lie and cheat than have honest conversations about relationship problems. The irony wasn't lost on me that Natalie had destroyed our relationship to be with him, only to lose him because of the way she'd handled our breakup. Natalie made one final attempt to contact me, sending a long email apologizing for everything and begging me to help her fix things with Oliver. She admitted she'd handled our breakup poorly, that she should have been honest about her feelings from the beginning. She claimed she'd learned from her mistakes and just wanted a chance to make things right. But I was done being her safety net. I'd spent months being understanding and supportive while she figured out her feelings, only to discover she'd been lying to me the entire time. Her apology felt more like desperation than genuine remorse, motivated by losing Oliver rather than real regret for hurting me. I didn't respond to her email. Instead, I focused on the positive responses my post continued to generate. People were sharing their own stories of overcoming betrayal, finding strength in honesty, and learning to value themselves enough to walk away from situations that didn't serve them. My pain had somehow become a source of comfort and inspiration for others going through similar experiences. Looking back now, I realized Natalie did me a favor by showing her true character before we got married or had children together. The woman I fell in love with was largely a fiction, someone who presented herself as honest and loyal while secretly planning her exit strategy. I deserved better than someone who could look me in the eye and lie about the most important aspects of our relationship. My post is still up, and I have no plans to remove it. Every word remains true, and the conversations it started about honesty and accountability in relationships continue to help people. Sometimes the best thing you can do after being betrayed is to tell your truth and let others draw their own conclusions. The consequences that follow aren't your responsibility, they're the natural result of choices other people made. I'm dating again now, taking things slowly and paying attention to actions rather than just words. I've learned to trust my instincts when something feels off, to ask direct questions and expect honest answers. Most importantly, I've learned that real love doesn't require deception, and anyone who truly cares about you will find the courage to tell you the truth, even when it's difficult.